Today, we discuss Trump's first 100 days in office and if the 100 days gets a grade of 100%. Then we continue with the discussion on Trump and see if his promises measure up to the promises of presidents past. And finally, we end with a heartfelt retrospective on the Scramble and take the time to thank all the people I bribed to get to this point. I'm James Schaefer, and this is a Scramble. Today we begin with the President of the United States. I know, you are absolutely shocked, but wait, don't switch me off or switch to a different tab just yet. Today I want to take a different spin on the oversaturated topic of President Trump's performance and his first 100 days. Today we focus on presidential promises and what it means within a historical context. More or less today we ask, how does Trump's promises and first 100 days measure up to the pressure of his presidential peers? President Trump has been absolutely incredibly torn apart by a myriad of facets in the media about his ignored policy promises and stated stances that he has swindled. Why didn't he complete the promises he made? Some murmur with angered breath. How could anyone support this fool? Some will chime to those of similar political alignment. When will he be impeached from office? Some ask humorously about a major political president. Let's take a couple things for fact here. Donald Trump has not completed all of his promises, but no president completes all of the promises they make on the campaign trail. Near the end of Obama's term, the reminder rung true of Obama's failed, well-advertised mission to close Guantanamo Bay.
Second point, our legitimacy is reduced when we've got a Guantanamo that is open, when we suspend habeas corpus. Those kinds of things erode our moral claims that we are acting on behalf of broader universal principles
that you could do early pertaining to executive orders.
Right.
One of them is to shut down Guantanamo Bay. Mm-hmm. Another is to change interrogation methods that are used by U.S. troops. Are those things that you plan to take early action on?
Yes. I have said repeatedly that I intend to close Guantanamo, and I will follow through on that. I've said repeatedly that America doesn't torture, and I'm going to make sure that we don't torture. Those are part and parcel of an effort to regain America's moral stature in the world.
But let's go back to a couple other presidents. President George W. Bush said he'd fully fund the Pell Grant program, which he froze in the fiscal quarter of 2005 in his education budget. He promised to pay the national debt down to a historically low level. But as of the following July of that statement, the national debt stood at $7 trillion, which was a record high. And last but not least, he promised to, quote, lock away the Social Security surplus for just Social Security, while he'd eventually use $159 billion of those funds in the first fiscal year of 2002. Bill Clinton said he'd reform the national health care system, which he couldn't get its day in Congress. He said he'd work for homosexuals in the military, which following his days in office signed the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy, which has been seen retrospectively as a misunderstood reform approach to homosexuals in the military. And George Bush Sr. has become immortalized by his broken promises that he made with 3 stirring concrete words.
My opponent won't rule out raising taxes, but I will, and the Congress will push me to raise taxes, and I'll say no, and they'll push, and I'll say no, and they'll push again, and I'll say to them, read my lips. No new taxes.
But I will admit I am comparing apples and oranges here. I can point out the hypocrisies of presidents who we see as successes who did not meet the expectations they themselves made. But Trump made some unbelievable expectations for himself. That I hold as an unbiased truth. No other president in recent memory signed himself on with a list of requirements self-assigned to a number that is outlandish of an outlandish amount of tasks. You can say voters knew this, but if we expect our president to promise and commit to promises and commitments they themselves have written, it's a troubling threshold when we excuse not keeping those assurances. We can excuse 1 or even 10 promises. Heck, that's a presidential standard. Let's go back to Obama. The campaign promise to eliminate all oil and gas tax loopholes by Obama, not kept. The promise to lift the payroll tax cap on earnings above $250,000, not kept. The promise to require employers to provide 7 paid sick days per year, not kept. I can go on and on and on. But those were campaign promises for the terms of office that's within 8 years. And within 8 years, Obama was not able to keep a large load of promises. I tell you to look at PolitiFact that has 7 pages of unkept promises by the Obama administration. But again, apples and oranges. Trump has about 64 promises he made that he would complete for the first day of his office. The examples I've listed out for the past presidents were campaign commitments to be fulfilled throughout the course of 4 to 8 years. While Trump made a flurry of promises that he said he would fulfill in the first 24 hours of his sitting in office. Repeal every single Obama executive order, withdraw from TPP, suspend Syrian refugee resettlement, designate China as a currency manipulator, get rid of gun-free zones in schools and military bases, end billions of funding and climate change spending for the UN, lift environmental roadblocks to energy infrastructure projects, propose a constitutional amendment for term limits on day one, impose a complete ban on the foreign lobbyists raising campaign dollars, as well as pursue a 5-year ban on White House and congressional representatives from becoming lobbyists, and cancel federal funding for sanctuary cities. And that's the coherently explained plans. We have the plan to get rid of international gangs of thugs and drug cartels, move 2 million criminal aliens out of the country, and start work on a border wall with Mexico. This is not to say all of Trump's promises were not kept. In fact, to be fair, 2 promises were kept for his first-day commitments. The first being a hiring freeze on all federal employees to reduce the perceived bloated bureaucracy of the American government, and the second issue, a temporary moratorium on new agency regulations as to stem the tide of excessive federal policy making. And the issue brought up to mock Trump for saying his first 100 days don't represent him. Well, Obama made the same comment, saying, quote, "The first 100 days is going to be important, but it's probably going to be the first 1,000 days that makes the difference." End quote. This has been taken as Obama making an excuse to not measure him for his first 100 days, but rather over the course of his work in office. Presidents try not to abide by the comparisons of their peers going straight into a presidency, because history is usually quite fair to the concerted efforts of past presidents, as long as their endeavors are seen with the drive and intent to better the country. So a new guy coming out and patting himself on the back is not often seen because that hand to pat is filled with responsibilities and obligations. A version of that hubris was featured in a television ad run by the Trump administration. Donald Trump has overcommitted, overstated, and oversold himself, but that's a presidential tradition. Where President Trump breaks rank is that he has excused himself from the accusation that he didn't follow through on promises. That's the unprecedented part. That's the unfortunate part.
Donald Trump, sworn in as president 100 days ago. America has rarely seen such success. A respected Supreme Court justice confirmed. Companies investing in American jobs again. America becoming more energy independent. Regulations that kill American jobs eliminated. The biggest tax cut plan in history. You wouldn't know it from watching the news. America is winning, and President Trump is making America great again.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
A president pledging something and not following through is fine. But a president saying he's fine with pledging and lying to say he followed through already is, well, a new threshold for this modern age. It's brave to say that you can accomplish inhuman feats, but it's foolhardy to boast you have already accomplished the feats that are considered inhuman. Thankfully, we have the insight into the president with constant media coverage of his promises archived into the frenzy of revisited material and his statements replayed over and over on the 24-hour news cycles. But I plead, do not take an excuse as a reason. The two are mutually exclusive. And I will admit, it is hard to discern the differences between the two. But we need to be better than our leaders and promise an honest assessment from ourselves to them and make sure that promise is not broken. That's our time for a break. We'll be right back with a discussion on Donald Trump's first 100 days and what it means for the next 100 after this.
It's about putting others first. It's doing your best at whatever you do. It's all of these. It's commitment. This message is brought to you by the U.S. Air Force.
Thank you for staying with us. We continue with our topic of Trump's first 100 days. With us today is UNLV College Republican and former worker for the Joe Heck campaign, Sean Flegnor. Also with us is KUNV host and reporter for Studio G, Lee Guilford. Thanks for being here, guys.
Thank you.
So we're going to continue with our topic that we just finished and wrapped up about Trump's first 100 days. And the first question goes to you, Sean. What is your grade for Donald Trump, and what is your perception about the rubric of the 100-day mark?
I would have to give him a solid B to a B minus for one thing, because what were his expectations from the majority of the people in the media, pundits? The world's going to be on fire. The country's going to be turmoil. We're going to have a stock market crash from the first 5 days of presidency. We're in no major wars. We're no better off or better worse than we were before. But some highlights that I like from his presidency so far is surprisingly how well he's handled North Korea, how well he's handled Syria. A lot of people were scared that it was going to escalate to more. So far, it seems like it stopped at the airstrike. We'll see, though, and that kind of goes with my complaint about the 100-day mark. You really can't get anything from a 100-day mark. It's only solely based off your political opinion. So say he cuts funding or something, we won't see the effect of that for years down the road. So I think the 100-day mark is more of a kind of thing for people just to say that they like him or they don't like him, but it's not going to change much.
We've seen more executive orders signed than any president in their first 100 days.
Reversing most executive orders put down by President
a president
Obama.
who his own campaign promise was, there's no need for executive orders. You get in there and you negotiate it. Then he sat down at his desk and signed more executive orders than anyone else. We've also seen more golf trips in the first 100 days than any president in the history of the presidency. We should be clear. The history of the presidency. Donald Trump has spent, I think, 39 rounds on the golf course after complaining that Obama golfs too much. Obama never golfed in his first 100 days. We have a president right now who, by his own admission, is in over his head. He has bitten off more than he can chew. It's more work than he expected to put forth, once again, by his own admission. These are his quotes. And now he's dropped a bomb in Afghanistan. We've dropped or threw 59 missiles into Syria just for funsies, and we sent a fleet over to the South China Sea.
If I thought he was doing a perfect job, I would have given him an A, B+, whatever. Again, 100 days I think is a stupid thing to go by. But don't get me wrong, I think he could be doing a lot better. He's still on Twitter, which I was really hoping to get off. The media, he's still, with the Andrew Jackson Civil War thing, I finally understand why he says these things.
Okay.
He says something ridiculous, but he says it, and then he knows he's wrong, but he's like, oh God, I can't turn back now. I just got to commit to this story and try to spin it around so it looks good.
So it sounds like for both of you, and I'm going to go to Lee on something you said here. You were talking about how, by his own admission, Trump had been saying things like, I'm a bit over my head on these things. But a lot of voters find that as an endearing factor of Trump. He's not afraid to bow out and say, this is difficult. This is not what I expected, but I'm more than welcome to take on the challenge. What do you say to voters that see that as an endearing factor?
The voters that see that as an endearing factor are also the voters that see as an endearing factor his stance on immigration. They're the voters that see as an endearing factor his attempt at a Muslim travel ban. They're going to like Trump no matter what Trump does. There's people that just loved Obama, that refused to believe that Obamacare was a failure. Obamacare was and is a failure. It was better than what we had before. Now, can we even measure Trump by that metric? Is it better than what we had before? Is it better than the alternative? C is a grade of average. Donald Trump jumped into the office in his first 100 days and tried to do everything he promised. In that, I give him credit. This man tried to write a piece of paper and build a $20 billion wall, and he said to heck with allowing brown people into this country if they're from places that he doesn't have business operations in. He went full gusto. For that, I give him an A. He came in and had the most aggressive first 100 days, which is exactly what I came on the show in the fall and said. He is going to come in like a gangbuster and try to clean house. Do I agree with everything? No. But did Donald Trump do exactly what he said he was going to do? Just about. He's been a hypocrite. He has flip-flopped. But when it comes down to issues, I think he has tried to address every single campaign issue he had. Like you said, the cutting funding for the EPA, horrible idea. Let's see how that plays out. Hasn't happened yet. Hasn't come through. This is his ideas and suggestions.
That's exactly my point with the 100-day mark. But I think when you look at a president and you want to see how well of a job they've done, you really can't just say overall. You got to look at it parts and judge them by those parts. So with foreign policy, I really have been, surprised and actually liking what he's been doing with foreign policy. As a Republican, that was my number one concern with Donald Trump during the election. North Korea, I mean, you have people like Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders complimenting Donald Trump how he's handling North Korea, something no president in the past has really made any headway with. I mean, he's making headway with China. After all he's been saying about China, you really think he'd be able to have a working relationship with them? He has a working relationship with China now.
Let's dig into that, though. So a lot of people saw Donald Trump as an isolationist, as a nationalist. And in the past 100 days, I think it can be made as an arguable point that he has been an interventionist and that he's gone against a lot of isolationist proponents.
So since Donald Trump has taken office, there have been 4 attacks by European descendants, white men, on people of color, people of minorities, Muslims. Donald Trump has spoken on none of them. So if you want to say he's an interventionist, instead of him praying for Paris and praying for Belgium and praying for everywhere where it supports his narrative, if we're going to call him an interventionist, can you speak on any of these issues at all? Just give me one comment about one terror attack, maybe the one up in Canada, maybe one of these colleges. Just speak on something that speaks to the fact that there are still minorities in this country who aren't safe. It is what it is. And that is something that started, it's not all Donald Trump's fault, but it has definitely gotten worse, and the vocal has gotten a lot louder. People are a lot more comfortable speaking out against things they don't agree with, even if those things are protected under the 14th Amendment. Constitutionalists, to heck with the Constitution. Let's isolate these people, or let's isolate this group, or let's worry about who this group sleeps with. And Donald Trump has done nothing but flame those fires in this country. So I can't say that he has done anything to make it inclusive.
So let's work out which line on that argument we're on. Because a lot of people have said that Donald Trump has increased fervor for white nationalists by the faux pas on Sean Spicer's part, the faux pas on Donald Trump's part, and a lot of people have just seen that as the left digging into these issues and trying to find sense out of misguided words that were later on corrected. Do you feel like Donald Trump is unknowingly or knowingly making a concerted effort to propping up the far right that are kind of seen as anti-multicultural, more pro-Western civilization-esque, at least to their point, how that argument is made?
When Sean Spicer made the comment that Hitler wouldn't gas his own people or wouldn't gas people, Donald Trump was silent. And it's those kind of things. Just go out there, just spill your propaganda. And if I really need to get in here, and if it gets too bad, maybe I'll speak up. The heat around Michael Flynn got really bad. They knew it was going to come to a headway. Flynn resigns, and then Trump throws him under the bus. That tends to be more of an MO of this entire operation of let's just throw all our buddies in place, and we'll just put out fires as they come up.
That's another thing I'd actually like to focus more when it comes to the first 100 days is his actual staff and his cabinet. Because I feel you get a much better metric from them because they have very specific jobs and it's much easier to judge them. Sean Spicer, still not off to a great start. I mean, I think the guy's talented. I think a lot of it is kind of 50% just bad luck of the draw, 50% he just can't get his words straight. I think depending how healthcare goes in the next month, Reince Priebus is going to be on the stove for a while if healthcare isn't passed in his first year. And then, then you have the whole Jared Kushner versus Steve Bannon fiasco. Yeah. It's just his whole stuff. There are things you want to like if you're right-leaning, but then there are things you just don't understand why they're there, how they're still there. The Michael Flynn was just a terrible start PR-wise for the cabinet as a whole. It's a mismatch of things.
So let's examine that real quick. Jeff Sessions, we have Jeff Sessions, Steve Bannon, who might or might not be with us anymore as a part of the White House. We have Jared Kushner, and we have Michael Flynn's gone, and we have Sean Spicer, and who was the education secretary? I've already forgotten her name.
Betsy DeVos.
Yes. Betsy DeVos. Do you feel...
What about Dr. Carson, the only doctor in his entire cabinet?
Unless he's stuck in an elevator.
Oh, gosh. So do you feel like that... the cabinet that he currently has is what grade would you give the cabinet then?
I would have to give the cabinet actually a lower grade than him. I would have to give him a B- to a C+ for the reason that I'm honestly not a fan of Jeff Sessions. Betsy DeVos, she's not off to a great start. I actually surprisingly am very impressed how Dr. Carson has been doing. He recently went down to Florida with Senator Rubio to really check out these which were dismal public housing, which there was no upkeep whatsoever. Something Gardens, it's in northern Florida, which actually they cleaned up and they've rebuilding a whole new thing there. But again, not a fan of Jeff Sessions. But off from the cabinet, one thing I am very happy about is the confirmation of Neil Gorsuch. I know it's not the cabinet, but it is a confirmation, a appointment by the president. That's something that was handled, as well as you can get in this polarized politics, especially I know Democrats and
they completely rewrote history of a judicial appointment just to have their way.
Which the previous administration had done with all their judicial appointments for almost all their judicial appointments besides, I believe it's their first, Sotomayor. I mean, Harry Reid is the one who caused this. Now he's out, so he doesn't get any of the flack. And whoever's in his position is the one who gets all the trouble. I mean, the Democrats are the one who put those rules in. They started the nuclear option in this past 8 to 10 years.
Lee, your response?
We have an education secretary who has, while 97% of education in this country is public, has no experience with public education.
If you want to get rid of her, then vote for, I forgot the name of the bill, but it gets rid of the Department of Education. So if you don't like her so much.
And to be honest with you, I'm not against it. But as long as we have a person in a position who is incompetent, no experience in the position, it is a testament to this administration's spite and contempt for the American people. Taking the only doctor you have and putting him in charge of housing because he came from housing is ridiculous. This man hasn't seen public housing since he was 16 years old. We have across the board people who have just flopped, failed, had no business where they're at. And then let's talk about the financial conflicts of interest that still have not been resolved.
So, go ahead, Sean.
I mean, don't get me wrong on that when it comes to all that stuff, the financial conflicts, the fact he still hasn't totally withdrawn from his business, his conflict with Ivanka and her
haven't
role.
seen tax returns. We don't know what our president is doing financially.
Oh, gosh. All right, well, Lee, you almost fell back in your chair when Sean said he would give the cabinet a B- or a C+. Walk us through that. What grade do you think they deserve?
F-.
F-.
I'd give them a Q.
What specific reason of what they've done for that? Not for the actual people, why they were chosen, but the actual...
Our Department of Interior is doing away with parks, or attempting to do away with parks. Our Department of Education is doing away with free lunches. They're doing away with programs to support young... But instead of maintaining the status quo, we're going retroactively. We're regressing instead of progressing. We're going to have less parks now protected under this administration. We're going to have less kids getting breakfasts and lunches in some cases at schools thanks to this education. We're going to have less kids getting after-school help thanks to this administration. We're going to have, let's see here, let's go to a different... We're going to have more military spending thanks to this administration with less taxation thanks to this administration.
I have one last question for both of you. In one sentence, look into your crystal balls right now and tell me what the next 100 days are in one statement. Sean?
Productive.
Productive.
For their sense of the word.
Okay. So for their definition.
For like what they want to do, yeah.
Okay, for their agenda.
Yeah.
And Lee, one statement for describing the next 100 days of the Trump administration.
We're going to war. That's it.
Well, if that happens, we'll be here. Don't know with who, but if that is true, we'll find out shortly. That's our time. I want to thank our panelists and let you know we'll be right back with our final segment after this.
We see stories of fear, despair, and poverty, but they can end with courage, hope, and love. With you, be a part of writing a story that's greater than poverty. Learn how at worldvision.org.
The kicker today might just be my last. Not because I'm getting fired and not because my station manager finally found out that I've been stealing equipment from the studio and selling it online. No, it's on my own accord, and with a heavy heart, hopefully this won't be the last time you see of me. Someday you might see my face on the 5 o'clock news with a subtitle saying, "Man at Large." When I first came onto this show nearly 3 years ago, it was within a complete and total fluke. I had gone into a classroom where a girl who had been a panelist on the Scramble said I sounded like I knew what I was talking about half the time. And she suggested the host at the time, Jason Hawley, to have me on. And within a couple of short emails, this guy reared his ugly face. Well, I myself, when it comes to the indefinite suspension, I think that, well, first off, if he has a case for the semantics, I think he does have a case, but that case is not going to make him come back to the Baltimore Ravens. Now, I'll admit it, I didn't really do an amazingly wonderful job on my first time. Actually, after my first statement to the first question, the host laughed at a comment I had made about Ray Rice's indefinite suspension in the NFL. The long-term problem of domestic violence.
So you're kind of assigning, you know, I'm sorry, excuse me, domestic violence issues. You're alluding to this.
I earned it. I'd take that. Either way, it has been an amazing ride. I'd like to finish off with this, though. First, for any of you watching at home or on a computer, I must say thank you for watching, and you'll get your payment in the mail next Tuesday. Second, for all of you that have been on this show and spun a topic or debated a point, I want to give you my fullest thank you. I'd say one of the best techniques I've mastered while doing this show is hurriedly grabbing people to come on and debate complex material and mastering the art of making a desperate plea in an email to come off as something more so professional with a request with a very restrained tone. Third, I would not have been able to do even an ounce of what I do for this show without the director, tech director, teleprompter, playback, CG operator, cameraman, floor director, and producer that I am so lucky to have. You are not always able to see them, but if you can't see them, that's probably because they're doing their jobs. All in all, thank you for your devotion to come in every day, and thank you for making this show what it is. I hope that our efforts here stand as a touchstone of the times we are living in, and in the end show that our minds were filled with compelling opinions and points of great interest, and not what some would assume is just minds that are just scrambled. That's our time. I want to thank our panelists and you for watching our show and let you know while all the other shows just like to ramble, we'll be right here for you on The Scramble. Thank you, and see you again.